Hello everyone, welcome back to another Jurassic Live Rarity Ranking video. This will be the third out of six, and it's the epics. This will probably be the longest one because there are 82 epics, which is more than any other rarity. Um, Reminder that this is unboosted, PvP only, and it is not epic only, it is full environment. And of course, my list is not the right list, it's just what I think. Um, if you want to, let me know your rankings and opinions in the comments. And without further ado, let's get started. Number 82 is it's an obvious choice. It's Aranasaurus. Aranasaurus is incomprehensibly awful. It's the second worst creature in the game. Yes, it's worse than the worst common in the game. Um, it's just awful. Uh, Bad health, super low speed. Sure, it has a nice base damage, but it only has one damaging move, and it's not even a good one at that. And yes, that is healing, which you might say gets rid of the bad health issue. But the problem is that it's so slow that the healing won't help it deal any extra damage. There is nothing good about this thing. It's just so bad. Number 81, Darwinopters. Darwinopters is a lot better than Oranosaurus, but is still extremely bad. It has bad health, bad damage, and yes, it's fast, but that doesn't really help it much. Pinning Strike sucks, Minor Swoop sucks, Fierce Impact is okay, Swap and Wound is okay, and unlike Scaffing it doesn't have like a heal, it has an impact, which you could say is a little better, but it doesn't have no escape, which is worse, undoubtedly. Number 80 is Corga Sukis. It's basically Daphosaurus Gen 2, but worse. It's got the same Distract Immune, less health, more speed, and it's got Group Distraction instead of Instant Distraction, which is definitely a downgrade. And it doesn't have Swap and Distraction. So yeah, it's just worse than Daphosaurus Gen 2, but otherwise pretty similar. Number 79 is Eukaryotes, which is similar to, like Coolosuchus, it's similar to a rare, and like Scaffingnath, sorry, Darwinopterus. They're all similar, like, these ones are all similar to rares. This one is similar to Megaloceros and is slightly worse, and very slightly worse. Honestly, you could maybe make the argument for it being better, but I think it's a little worse. Same base stats, except it has one more speed. Worse resistances, it's got 25% more vulnerability resistance, but that barely makes a difference, while losing 25% deceleration resistance does make a big difference. Its moveset is debatably better. Yeah, its moveset is slightly better. Superiority impact is a little better than decelerating impact, but it doesn't get over. That doesn't, like, solve the problem of not being decel immune like Megaloceros, which is undoubtedly worse. So yeah. Anyways, number 78 is Centausaurus. Another Hadrosaur, not quite like that, absolutely not as bad as Aranosaurus, but still bad. It has much better health, actually okay base damage, still slow, has some resistances, and it has good Frosty Strike, which normally would suck, but it actually helps to deal a little bit of damage. I believe it does 3750 damage in 2 turns, which for a non-hybrid Hadrosaur is pretty good. Or you could also heal for extra as well. It heal for like 2500 something. But yeah, that's Centausaurus. Number 77 is Tyranidon. This is similar to Tupandactylus and the Sonorosaurus. Better than Tupandactylus, worse than the Sonorosaurus. It's got frail, bad base damage, and fast. It's got the Defense Shining Strike like the other two, Fierce Impact like the Sonorosaurus, Impact and Run like Tupandactylus with the Armor Piercing counter, Swap and Ferocity. It's just not really that reliable. It doesn't do. It just doesn't work. It's too frail is the main issue. It also completely lacks resistances, which doesn't help either. Plus, I'm not sure run moves should be on counter attackers. Anyways, number 76 is Ankylosaurus. Super tanky, will survive a long time against anything that is not a fierce, but it does not do much damage at all. It's surprisingly fast for how tanky it is, and it's got decel immune, and its superior vulnerability is incredibly good. These two moves are good. It just doesn't all work together because superior vulnerability is its only damaging move, and its base damage sucks. Number 75, Montaguanodon, the weakest hybrid in the game. It's awful. It's the worst hybrid in the game. Like I said, it did get a tiny buff in 2.14 where Resilient Impact got changed to Group Resilient Impact, but that is a very small buff. That did put it above Ankylosaurus, though, when before it would have been below. So, decent health, decent like mediocre damage, low speed, swap vention resistance, which, whatever, and a basic Hadrosaur moveset. It's basically a Monolothosaurus, but with Group Resilient Impact and Great Emergency Heal added onto it. It's got less health than a Monolothosaurus, and it's slower. Obviously, it's still better than a Monolothosaurus by a decent amount, but it still sucks, and it could be better. Anyways, next at 74 is Kentrosaurus. Honestly, it's more like tied with the Monoguanodon. But yeah, Kentrosaurus is like two Jangosaurus, but worse. Well, let me find it. There it is. It's just worse to Jangosaurus. Same health, same damage, a good bit more speed, but it has Resilient Impact instead of Precise Rampage, which you could argue is better, but for like this creature in particular, I think Precise Rampage is better because it leads to better turn one. It also doesn't have Swap and Slow, but I'm not really going to hold it against it because Swap and Slow isn't useful anyways. Number 73, Scaffolder. Honestly, probably about the same level of weak as its ingredient Scaffignathus, and much worse than Diplotator. It could have gotten so much more. It could have gotten good damage from Diplotator. It could have gotten the Distract Resistance to Diplotator. And it could have gotten no escape from Scaffignathus. And it could have gotten like Ferocious Strike. It just could have been so much better. In fact, no escape alone would make it at least somewhat usable. It would probably shoot it up a few spots. So yeah, it doesn't work for much of anything. Minor Swoop sucks, and you're not going to use it much because you're not going to survive enough to use it. Distracting Impact is okay. I mean, it's the only damage it's really going to do outside of the swap-in. So yeah. Number 72 is Spinoturrapter. Spinoturrapter is basically tied with Scaffolder. They're both two super weak hybrids. Spinoturrapter, despite being the Spinosaurus rig, which is one of the biggest like animation types in the game, it has horrendous health with good damage and good speed, and then this moveset is such a letdown. It got Strike from Utahoraptor instead of Fear Strike from Spinosaurus. It got Gashing Wound instead of Lethal Wound, and it didn't get No Escape, and it could have gotten Pounce from Utahoraptor instead of Distracting Impact. This thing could be so much better, and it could also get a little bit more health too, although neither of its ingredients have much health to begin with. But you could at least bring it up to like 3150 so it doesn't get one shot so often. Anyways, number 71, Stuthia Mimus. Could have been so much better as well. Like, Ornithomimus is one of the best rares in the game, but this thing sucks. It's really slow for an Ornithomimid. In fact, it's by far the slowest Ornithomimid in the game. Actually, no, not by far. I forgot about Procerathomimus, but still, by far the slowest non-hybrid Ornithomimid. And sure, it's got the highest health of them, but it's also got pretty low damage for an Ornithomimid. And its resistances, crit reduction immunity, you could argue that it's maybe better than losing, better than 25% of your swap vention resistance, but I'd argue it's a little worse, so it's got worse resistances than the other two. And its moveset's not that great. Evasive Strike, both the others have that. Group Distraction sucks, and Cunning Rampage, it's alright, but just isn't enough to save it. Number 70, Rolly Mammoth. Back in the old days, this thing used to be a monster. Before 2.0, this is the best epic non-hybrid, probably best non-hybrid in the game. It had 1400 damage with the Persistent Ferocious Strike and Armor-Piercing Rampage. That dealt a lot of damage. now it only has 1,000 damage and has group destroying impact instead of armor piercing rampage. Um, it's also got low health for something so big. Persistent Fortress Strike is still one of the best basic moves in the game, and I will defend that. Persistent Fortress Strike is an excellent move. But Taunting Bellow sucks, and Group Destroying Impact isn't really enough to save it, so yeah, Mammoth is not good. 69, Gripe Asukas. This thing is horrifically overrated. There is not much good about this. I don't know why people say it's a decent epic. I have seen people say it's better than T-Rex. It is not even close to being as good as T-Rex. So average stats across the board, and the moveset is the main issue. Ferocious Strike is its only reliable source of damage. You're only doing 3,600 to 2 turns, which isn't that good. And Immobilized helps its hybrid Gripelith. It just doesn't help it. It helps Gripelith because it allows it to stall more for its heal. And this thing doesn't have anything like that. So, yeah. No Escape is still good, of course, but Gripe Asukas, it's just not good. Number 68, Tyrannosaurus. It's like Lithonax, but better. It's got the exact same base stacks with a higher crit chance as Lithonax, and then it doesn't have the basic shielding move, but it has this, and it still has priority 1, still has armor piercing counter, and resilient strike. Still a weak epic, though. It just lacks the oomph. I don't really know how to say it. It's just not good. Number 67, Haas Eagle. This thing did get a pretty decent buff in 2.14. It went from being like around the level of Ankylosaurus. Where are you? It went from being around the level of Ankylosaurus to above Rajasaurus. So yeah, super frail, low damage, but very fast. In fact, until 2.14, it was the fastest creature in the game. Strong Vision immunity, whatever. And it got Cunning Strike instead of Evasive Strike, and Distracting Impact instead of Distraction. So it actually does a little bit of damage now, even if its output still isn't very good. That it's still super frail, of course. Swappers are going to completely obliterate this thing. Tanks will obviously destroy it, but it is better than it was before, and it's super fast, which is pretty nice. Number 66, Sonorosaurus. One of the easily the worst of the epic sauropod. Well, not easily because of Notopad. Easily the worst of the 3 epic non-hybrid sauropods. The worst Brachiosaurus rig creature by a pretty decent margin, and it just sucks. It's got. Of course, it's still tanky, but it doesn't have armor like Brachiosaurus and Draft Titan do. Still has 1,000 base damage. Really slow. Brachiosaurus actually has 111 speed despite being so tiny, just so huge. This thing is significantly smaller than Brachiosaurus in like real life, but it's way slower too. It also has worse resistances. It trades out like a good swap prevention and stone resistance for taunt immunity, which is completely useless, and vulnerable immunity, which isn't exactly that useful. And its moveset is also really bad. Taunting vulnerability basically acts like an impact because the vulnerability applies first. But that means you're only going to have one attack of vulnerability after that, which will probably be taken up by the counter. It has no way to decelerate. And sure, medium Brazilian counterattack may be the second best counterattack in the game, but it does not work for something whose only major multiplier is devastation. And you're not always going to survive to get devastation either, because this thing doesn't have any armor or shield to speak of. So yeah, it's just not good. 65, Maiasaura. This thing used to be a beast. It's not awful, but it's still really bad. It is incredibly frail. It's easily the frailest Hadrosaur. But it does have good base damage and is the fastest non-hybrid Hadrosaur in the game by a good margin. And its main standout part is Instant Rampage. There's really no other point to this thing besides Instant Rampage being really good. That's it. Number 64, Monolothosaurus. This is like Dilo, but worse. In fact, a lot of epics are like a lot of rares, but worse. Even though it's a rarity higher. So, Dilophosaurus, but quite a bit less health, a little bit more speed, and it swaps out Distracting Impact and Cunning Impact for... Distracting Impact and Cunning Rampage for Cunning Impact and Distracting Rampage, which you can debate whether that's better or not, but whatever. Really, it just has less health is the main issue of it being worse than Dilophosaurus. And otherwise it's a bread and butter cunning. Number 63, Aquaminus. I will say this thing gets more hate than it deserves, but I will not deny that it is a pretty bad epic. I've seen a lot of people say it's the worst epic hybrid in the game. Absolutely not. No, it isn't. So, it is wasted potential, though. It could have 3,000, I mean, there's in between its ingredients. Damage is also in between its ingredients, but it could be higher. Base stats make sense for those ingredients, but it could have stun immunity and distract immunity, because Rolly Mammoth has that. And its moveset, I mean, Evasive Rampage is a decent move, I guess, and Distracting Impact is too, but Evasive Strike and Group Distraction are not very good, especially Group Distraction, and it doesn't have enough damage or health to really help. Number 62, Amargacephalus. Horrendous base stats outside of armor and not that useful resistances with a decent moveset. It can span these impacts, and it has this small counter and Spirit Vulnerability, which is super good, and I guess Invincibility Taunt, which really doesn't help it that much. Yeah, I don't have anything else to say about it. Besides that, I do think it is a little overrated. 61, Bumpy. A character dino, which means I automatically don't like it being in this game, but it's not too bad. We're starting to get into the more mediocre epics rather than the really bad ones. So, basic Ankylosaurus stats, with basic Ankylosaur resistances. Moveset is not so basic. Well, these three are. This one isn't. Stunning Alert is a decent swapping move, and it allows it to basically get a free swap against things that aren't stun resistant. And Group Tonic Shield Impact is an alright move, I guess. Invincibility Taunt's okay. Spirit Vulnerability is really good. It's a tank, and yeah, that's it. Number 60, Centausaurus. An epic that, while not bad, is extremely overrated by a few people. Of course, typical bad Ceratopsian stats. Ceratopsians usually have very awful stats. And it's basically Triceratops, but a little better. It's got less speed, but a little more armor, and instant charge instead of greater stunning strike, which is better. Otherwise, basically just Triceratops. Number 59, Notopatosaurus. It's a tank. I do think so most people I've seen a lot of people say Amargacephalus is better. I think this is slightly better than Amargacephalus. For one, it's got better survivability due to just way more health. Its damage output, it is less damage output, but not like Amargacephalus doing much damage anyways. Better resistances because of distract resistance. It is faster, although it's still super slow. Its moveset is not too good though. Group Decelerating Strike and Taunting Rampage are awful. But I still think it's better than Amargacephalus. 58, Stegosaurus. Wow, what's with the 2.6 creatures being really bad? Although, all 5 creatures from that update are epics, and 3 of them are mediocre or worse. We'll be getting to the other 2 later. The other non-hybrid and the hybrid from that update. So, Stegosaurus. I don't know why it's this slow, even though it's got the small packy rig. It's not Erliko Rex Gen 2, okay? It's nothing like it. In fact, honestly, the small Pachycephalosaur rig, when it comes to non-hybrids, is really weird. Because you have the 2 Sticky Molochs, which are resilient. So you have Erliko Rex, which is a resilient. Then you have Erliko Rex Gen 2, which is a fierce. And Stegosaurus, which is a cunning. That's just weird. I honestly think that should all be the, fast resilience. But yeah. So... Low health, average damage, average speed with Distract Immunity. I'm not going to talk about Crit Reduction Immunity because it's not useful. And a meh moveset. Like, these two moves are good. Critical Impact, it's not as bad as some people say, but it's just not a good move either. This thing doesn't have... This thing has, like, okay damage output, but still, again, not that good damage output. It'll do, like, 3,400... Like, 3,400 in 2 turns or something like that. And Swap and Stun, which is overrated in my opinion. So, yeah. 57, Troodon. A non-hybrid raptor that I do think is overrated, but still just meh. Hold on. Okay, it's got double rampages, which, like, it can just spam the rampages constantly, which does lead to pretty decent damage output. But otherwise, it's just such a basic raptor. Distract Immunity, fast, low health. Yeah, it's basic. Not bad, though. 56, Erlikosaurus. It is slightly worse than Gen 2. Like, it does have 50 more damage, but it also has a worse distracting move. Otherwise, it is literally the exact same. Number 55, Stegoceratops. An epic hybrid swapper and a pretty mediocre one at that. I remember back in, like, the old days, like in 2018, this thing was a beast. There was one of the best epic hybrids in the game. Now, not so much. Typical bad Ceratopsian stats with a typical Ceratopsian moveset, but with group distorting impact added on top, which is alright. It's literally Triceratops with more health, less speed, a little more armor, and group distorting impact. So yeah. 54, Megalogaia. Back in like 1.12, this thing was really good. And then 2.0 happened and it became mediocre, and then literally nothing has happened to it since. Nothing has happened to a lot of creatures since 2.0, honestly. I miss the days when they would just change things just to see what happens and, like, change things that no one talks about. And now they only focus on top tiers and only add broken stuff. So yeah. Megalogaia. Mediocre stats. Could have better assistances than it has. Like, it could have swap prevention immunity. And a moveset that just went all out with the shields of deceleration. Like 3 moves that decelerate, and plus the counter, and 3 moves that shield. Yeah. That's Megalogaia. 53, Majestic Ethereum. This is basically just Androsarchus, but worse. It has more health, but less damage, and a good bit less speed, with the same decel immunity and high crit chance. Definitely worse moveset, though. Swap and Ferocity means it can have a running takedown, like basically a running takedown on turn 1. But you have to swap in for that, and you might not survive, especially if you're going against something that's faster. And it still has no escape, and otherwise it's just a fierce moveset with Rend. 52, Pachycephalosaurus. Honestly, a creature that sometimes I forget is even in the game. Yeah. So, basic stats, and a pretty basic moveset. Really, most of the time you're going to be going Distorting Impact into Rampage and Run. Deal a decent 4,200 damage, and then you can bring it back in later. It's a very basic creature. 51, Blue. The face of the Jurassic World trilogy, and it's okay, I guess. Like, she's alright. Super frail, with decent damage and very fast. Has stun immunity, which is a rarity among raptors. And it's got precise pounce and evasive impact and cunning strike. It's alright, but her baby is better. And we'll get to her baby later. Number 50, Smilodon. I also sometimes forget this is in the game. it is a little underrated, but it's not too good either. It's basically Pyro Raptor, but worse. We'll get to Pyro Raptor later. Um, absolutely nothing like Marsupialion, besides the fact that it has Prowl. So yeah, basic cunning stats, basic cunning moveset apart from Prowl. 49, Carbonemes. The turtle. This thing used to be a nightmare back in the days. Like, you would dread fighting this thing in the old days. It was awful fighting it back when it was OP. And one of the best non-hybrids in the game back then. Now it's kind of just gone into irrelevance. It is still stupidly tanky with that 60% armor, even though its other base stats are horrendous. And of course it still has Devastation and Dig and Taunt Pure Vulnerability, the classic Carbonemes moveset. It's just doesn't, like with, it's basically just been power crept, honestly. Yeah. 48, Sticky Moloch. Honestly not bad. Its stats are more like cunning stats than resilient stats, but honestly, it's a Sticky Moloch. It's kind of to be expected. Shielding Strike, Impact and Run, Instant Charge. From a glance, this moveset looks really bad, but because it's high base damage, this combo, Shielding Strike into Instant Charge into Impact and Run, will do a lot of damage. And it's super fast. 47, Concavinator. The best non-hybrid of this rig, being it's slightly better than Carnotaurus. Yeah, it's got good base damage for the rig. And it has a defense shot and counter, which is good, plus an impact. Otherwise it's pretty basic, but it's not bad. We're starting to get into the decent epics here. 46, T-Rex. Very basic chomper. Super slow, insane base damage with decent health, and literally 3 fierce moves. Like, literal fierce moves. Enough said. 45 from Chenia, the best of those 2.6 non-hybrids. Yeah, it's like Oviraptor, kind of mixed with Ornithomimus. It's got the Rampage and Run from Ornithomimus. Keeps Devious Strike and Sidestep from Oviraptor. Has the same resistances as Oviraptor. And the same stats, except for slightly lower crit chance, but a good bit more base damage. Still worse than Ornithomimus by a decent margin, but better than Oviraptor. 44, Ovilophosaurus. This one is pretty weird. Although not as weird as it used to be, because it used to have this used to have 0 cooldown before that was fixed in 2.17. Thank God that was fixed though. Okay, so this one's a lot to unpack. Bad health, mediocre damage, good speed. Although all of these stats could be better. It has less damage with both ingredients. Its health is much more closer to the lower health of Oviraptor. Its speed is much more closer to the lower speed of Dilophosaurus. Actually, no, its speed is right in between. Never mind. I forgot it got its speed buff from 125 to 127. Whoops. Okay. The weird part is the resistances, honestly. Like, it has both Distract and Desommune, and also happens to have 75% Rend resistance, which is really weird. So yeah. And in the moveset, it's got Group Cunning Impact, it's got Devious Strike, it's got Critical Impact for some reason, and Distracting Rampage. Yeah, this one is kind of weird. I might drop it lower later, I don't know. Yeah. Anyways, 43, Eat Daphosaurus. Overrated, but still pretty decent. So, it's a synapsid. It is a bit different than the other ones because it's actually, like, it's tanky, but has bad base damage. Still has average speed like most of them. Has a lot of resistances, but the main difference is that it has Persistent Ferocious Strike, which is really good. But it's not going to do all that much damage because it has only 1,000 damage. And the other, like, Dimetrodon type non-hybrid epic is Number 42, Secodontosaurus. Secodontosaurus is definitely much more offensive. It's got basically the exact... I think it's got the exact same resistances, actually. One less speed, which doesn't make much of a difference. A little less health, but much more base damage, and more typical fierce moveset. #41, Spinosaurus Gen 2. Basically a straight upgrade of the regular Spinosaurus. More health, and otherwise base stats are the same. And then it has Cleansing Strike instead of Fierce Strike, which, for something like this, I would say is a little better for a Spinosaurus. Because it can allow it to cleanse, like, distraction and stuff, which otherwise it wouldn't be able to do. Anyways. Number 40, Scorpius Rex Gen 2. By far the weakest of the three Scorpius Rexes. It's just not that great. Mediocre stats across the board with some resistances. And Strike and Run is incredibly overrated. Like, it's just so bad. Quill Impact is pretty good, though, and so is Defensive Swap-In. It's just, like, decent. It's just a solid epic, but not much more. Number 39, Corga Sukis. Remember when this thing was the ultimate, like, damage beast, and it just, like, either died or murdered everything? Not anymore. Now it's just kind of there. Like, awful base damage, okay speed, good health. Group Frosty Strike into Fierce Rampage and then to Cleansing Impact. That's like 4,500 in the 2 turns and then a 1,500 after for 6,000 in 3 turns. There's basically a version of this that's better. We'll get to that in a little bit. Number 38, Dodo. A little underrated, I must say. It's got good health for a flock, although low speed for a flock, but it has D-Cell immunity, which is really good. And then Alert Decoy is, in my opinion, an underrated move. Sure, it takes away part of your health, but it does a lot of damage. Flightless Strike into that. So yeah. Number 37 is another flock, Listosaurus. There's plenty of more epic flocks to come, you'll see that. This one is a newer one, and I initially had it slightly below Dodo, but now I have it slightly above, because Evasive Restore is actually pretty good. Like, Evasive Heal is actually really good. Evasive Restore is too, of course. Although, even though it's got, like, that. I meant to say Evasive Heal, but, yeah. Otherwise, Impact and Run, I guess, is alright. It's got some resistances, it's got flock stats. Yeah. That's on Escape, too. Okay, 36, Beta. One of the 3 epics of 2.17, but the weakest one. Its hybrid is super OP, though. We'll get that in the unique ranking. Very similar stats to Blue. It's got 2 more speed, but 100 less damage. Resistances, though, are very different. It has D-Cell immunity for whatever reason, even though it's this 3rd fastest thing in the game. Yeah. And then its moveset. It's Evasive Strike, Playful Pounce, and Impact and Run. Playful Pounce is, I guess, it's good. I guess it's basically cleansing, dodging, speed, increasing pounce, but with an extra cooldown. Cowers a swap in. It's like literally a cunning swap in. Like it has the 2 most cunning things. Yeah. I haven't used it yet, so I'm not really sure if this is the right place, but this is where I'm putting it. 35, Stuthia Mimus. Oh boy, I have a history with this one. Everyone has a history with this one. When it was added, in fact, let me take you a history lesson. This is one of the most, like, constantly balanced things, that, like, it was balanced for a really long time. So, 1.6, it was added. It was good. 1.7, it got a little buff. 1.8, it got a giant buff, and it was like one of the best epics in the game. 1.9, an even bigger buff. It became an absolute monster. Then it got a slight toning down to 1.10, but also that brought one of its moves back from being useless. And then it did not get changed at all. It kept its reign of terror over the epic rarity. until 2.0. In 2.0, it got a huge nerf. Its health was drastically reduced, and so was its speed. And of course, it lost full immunity because that was completely removed from the game. In exchange for resistances, its moveset remained intact. And then it did get some of its health back. And yeah. And now it's a solid epic. Massive damage is its main thing. Cunning Strike into Distracting Rampage is a typical combo. Nullifying Counter is pretty good, I guess. Yeah. Number 34, Pyro another one that used to be super good. It was added in 1.7, and it had, of course, it has lower health than it does now, but it had long protection, and it had precise rampage. Of course, it didn't have no escape, because on escapes didn't exist at that point. And then it got no escape, but also a damage nerf to 1000 from 1100. And then it basically stayed the same. Still was a really good epic until 2.0 when it got changed. It got changed into what it is now. So yeah, it's got instant distraction for some reason, even though none of its ingredients have anything cunning about them. It's kind of like the Suikotator of epic hybrids when it comes to that. Yeah. Instant distraction does help with the counter though, and it has no escape. It's basically Perlith, but worse. But also more versatile, but still worse. So yeah. 33, Argenta Boa. One of the most overrated creatures in the game. I have seen people say that this is a top 2 epic hybrid. What? No. We're not even in the top 30 of epics. And I've seen people put it consistently in the top 10 or even top 5. No. Bad stats, admittedly good resistances, and a alright moveset. If I had precise rampage and like a little more speed, like 112, and then give it like 4050 health, it would be good. It'd be more good than it is now. Unfortunately, that's not the case. On escape, Dust Cloud is good, yes. Rotor Strike is good. Shield Deciding Strike is good. Has a counter. Yeah. It is good. It's just so overrated. The main issue being that it is super frail. That's an issue with a lot of counterattackers, though, so, yeah. 32, Allosaurus Gen 2. Another chomper, but a little different. Cleansing Shattering Strike. I'm honestly surprised that this is the only creature in the game with Cleansing Shattering Strike. I think it should be used on more creatures. I'm just verifying that. Otherwise, it has basic chomper stats. Actually has some resistances, though, which most non-hybrid chompers lack. And... or at least, like, these two resistances in particular, they lack bleed immunity and top function immunity. And it's got running takedown. Overall, good epic. Number 31, Baryonyx. This thing is pretty good. Group takedown is absolutely useless, and you're never going to use it in PvP. You just go Defense Shroud, Strike into Fierce Rampage for the free 4200 damage. It's got good base stats, and it's D-Cell immunity. It's D-Cell immune, so, yeah. Number 30, Elenqua. Honestly, kind of underrated. It's got solid base stats. With Resilient Strike, Rampage. Long invincibility is the main part. Like, against Cunnings, it's going to take a while for you to be killed because of that crazy shield. And then Rampage allows you to do decent damage. And then it also has the free swap in, too. 29 and 28 are the two Andrewsarchus hybrids. 29 Androtherium, 28 Androtodon. Let's start with Androtherium. Both of these hybrids are worse than Andrewsarchus, which is odd, even though they're hybrids. But yeah, they're still decent epics in their own right. Androtherium, it's got like okay speed, okay damage, low health, a good amount of resistances though. And then Ferocious Strike into Rending attacks, and I'll see what you can be doing. Has no escape, which is good. Group Warning Squeal does kind of suck, but whatever. It is a shield, at least. And, yeah. Androtodon, I think, is much more interesting, though. Also, both these hybrids are horrendously ugly, even though that has nothing to do with the ranking. I just hate their designs. So this one definitely has worse stats, and worse resistances, but it has one special thing. Exposing counter plus rending takedown. On turn 2, they're going to be vulnerable, and then that rending takedown will do 90% of their, like, it'll take 90% of their health away. This thing is really good for beating up tanks. But, yeah, it gets completely just sacked by Cunnings. So, yeah. And faster fears to destroy it, too. Anyways, number 27, Posting Metrodon. This is like Corga Sukis, but better, as I was talking about. So, faster, less crit chance, more base damage, much more resistances, and then basically a pretty similar moveset. Group Frosty Strike into a multiplier. Still does 4,500 to 2 turns though, because even though it's less than multiplier, because of the higher base damage, and it has heal instead of cleansing impact. So you can make an argument that it's better. You can make an argument that it's worse, heal compared to cleansing impact. But in general, it's better because it's just faster and has more resistances. Number 26, Pyro Raptor. Honestly underrated. People think blue is better than Pyro Raptor when that's not the case at all. Pyro Raptor is basically kind of like Smilodon, but has a little bit more health. Doesn't have the precise, but has a better basic move, and I would argue Instant Distraction is better for a creature like this than Prowl, and honestly better in general. But yeah. And then right above that is Dakota Raptor. I honestly think they're basically tied. Dakota Raptor is more close to Troodon in terms of how it's used. It has 2 rampages, although you can't really spam them, because on turn 4 you'll be in a situation where you can only use Sidestep. Sidestep, though, is good. And then it's got a little more health than Troodon with the same damage, a little bit less speed, though, and it keeps it the Distract immunity. Yeah, Dakota Raptor is pretty good. But it is not the best of the non-hybrid raptors. We'll get to that in just a little bit. 24, Acrocanthosaurus. A chomper that is actually somewhat tanky, although, of course, there's one later that was much tankier. 4800 health. Otherwise, it's basic chomper stats. And it's got Group Cleansing Strike on top of 2 chomper moves. Overall, pretty good. Anyways, 23. We're at the best non-hybrid raptor, Ghost. This is the only of the Atrocity Raptor in the game, though I think there will be another one added later. Pretty basic raptor stats, but it also has decel immunity, and unlike the other raptors, it's part fierce. Cautious Strike, very good. Fierce Impact, it's Fierce Impact. And Berserk Decimation. Berserk Decimation, it does lose some of its health, but it does a lot of damage. So yeah, this thing does 5,400 in 2 turns, which is really good. So yeah. It also pins you for whatever reason. It should be pinning the enemy though, but yeah. That's Ghost. I think it is a little underrated. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Okay. 22, Ailuroarctos. This one is actually kind of weird. So, mediocre health, good damage, low speed. It's got the typical DSL and Vuln resistance that a lot of creatures have. It has one of the most broken heals, like moves in the game, though. Ferocious Shielded Heal is just straight OP. It increases your attack, and instead of healing 0.5x, the attack increase means you heal 0.75x, which means you heal more like 1,000 health. And then it also shields too. And I mean, you also have the Frosty, which means for your Fierce Rampage that's going to happen the next turn, you're going to do over 4,000 damage. This thing, and it's also hard to kill this thing. It also has good Alert Decelerating Impact, which is another really good move. Plus counter power heal. And swap and heal, but that's not very useful. Yeah, this thing is super good. Although I do think it's not as powerful as some people say, but it is still really good. 21, Scootosaurus. A good tank with revenge capabilities. It's got a lot of health. It's got average speed, average damage. To 2 best immunities in the game, plus vulnerable immune. And Revenge Exerting Impact is mostly what you're going to be doing in turn 1 just for that 2400 damage, and then you're going to be spamming that and the shield. It'll take a while for you to be killed unless you're fighting a fierce. And yeah. Number 20, Sarcoryxis, the Old King. Basically from like basically like from after 2.0. I don't remember exactly when it became the best like epic, but basically until 2.7, from some point after 2.0, some point in late 2020, like mid-late 2020, this is the king of the epic rarity. Yeah. Basically, back then it had more like 1300 damage, 116 speed, decel immunity, and then the same moveset, except of course it's only strike decelerated instead of vulnerability, which is better. And it was so good. Although nowadays it would probably be worse than it was then because of all the power creep. And plus it wouldn't do well against Phlox. Phlox were actually added in the update that it got nerfed. So we never got to see how the old one would perform against Phlox. But nowadays, so Ferocious Impact is a really good big hit for turn 1. And then it's got Immobilize, which it's okay on it, I guess. It's got no escape. Greater Stunning Strike allows it to stall some. Of course, Immobilize does too, but yeah, Greater Stunning Strike does damage off it. Resilient Strike, and yeah. Number 19, Dimodactylus, another one that I think is overrated, but is still really good. This got buffed in, I forgot what version. I believe it was 2.11 that it was buffed in. It was buffed in that update. It basically just got more health, more damage, more speed, higher crit chance, and a counter. Yeah. The counter helped it a lot. So, pretty like low health and low damage, fast, and cleansing. One of the issues I have with it though is that it has 2 run moves, which I think is just bad. But it honestly, you're not gonna be using impact and run much. You're mostly gonna be using cleansing. You're mostly gonna be swapping this thing in, using swap and wound, and then the counter when they hit you, and then getting out with cleansing swoop. But yeah. Short defense, I guess, is there if you want to stay there a little longer. It's got no escape, which is good for swap predicting and for just making sure the thing you're swapped into doesn't go away. And yeah. Number 18, Antillo Chops. Yeah, this thing is pretty good. Mid-level health, low damage, high speed, with good resistances, of course. And this is a revenge creature with Mutual Fury on top of that. Superiority Strike is honestly probably better than Resilient Strike now after the Resilient Strike changed back in 2.9. And then it's got Revenge Accelerating Impact, which is good. Revenge Accelerating Impact is good. Revenge Shattering Rampage is pretty good. Mostly you could be doing Revenge Assorting Impact and then Revenge Shouting Rampage for the 4,400 in 2 turns. And Mutual Fury actually helps it some against Cunning to outspeed them. And Swap and Slow is not very useful, especially because you can't use it with the Revenge. Yeah. Okay, number 17, Erliko Gamma. A Cunning hybrid. It's basically like Erlikosaurus Gen 2 on steroids. It's got more speed, more damage, more resistances, and then it's got Strike and Run on top of its already existing moveset. Strike and Run is pretty bad, but it doesn't really hurt this thing very much. Allows it to get out at least. So you do a Precise Pounce, do a lot of damage. Debilitating Distraction helps reduce that damage. Honestly, it's just an underrated move in general. Strike and Run if you want to get out. Cunning stats, and it's also got Distract Immunity and Swap Mention Immunity. So yeah, pretty good. But I think Velociraptor is a little better. There is kind of a debate on which one of the two is better, but I think Velociraptor is better. It can spam rampages, so it does a lot more damage. Also got Cautious Strike, which is a straight upgrade from Minimal Speed Up Strike. Deliberate Prowl isn't very good, but it's not that bad either. Resistances are, I would say, actually better. Like, Sure, it doesn't have any distract resistance, but it has stun immunity. Which I would say is a little better. Of course, it loses crit duct immunity, but doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. But it also has bleed immune, while the other one only has 50% bleed resistance. When it comes to stats, the stats are the exact same with a little bit less base damage. Number 15, Brachiosaurus, a good tank, but of course not the best epic non-hybrid tank. There is another one that we'll be getting to later. Tank as in sauropod in this context. High health, low damage, surprisingly good speed for how giant this thing is. 111 is a lot for something this big. Good resistances, and it's a resilient moveset, like Resilient Strike, a Shield, and Resilient Rampage. It's as resilient as you could get, although unless you replace the Shield with Resilient Impact, which the only creature in the game with just the blank strike, blank impact, blank rampage, and they're all the same is T-Rex. So yeah, and I guess they also have a couple that's blank strike, blank impact that are commons, and an example of that is what's it called? Allosaurus. So yeah. Brachiosaurus though, good tank. Number 14, Indominus Rex Gen 2. Another hybrid, one that I do think is a little underrated. So, it's got average health, good damage, low speed. That's a lot of what you get from Fierce. And high resistances, which Indoms are known to have. And an admittedly weird moveset. Cloak obviously makes sense because it's an Indom, but Mutual Fury and Definite Strike is not what you would expect from these two. I mean, Definite Strike kinda, because of course T-Rex Gen 2 has Fierce Strike, and Echo has a precise move. But Mutual Fury basically just came out of nowhere. But Mutual Fury is honestly the best part of it. It allows it to speed up to 119 speed after you use it, and pack a big wallop with the 4200 Armor Piercing Rampage you do after. Or you could Cloak after that and make that Armor Piercing Rampage do 8400, which is a lot. Number 13, Microraptor. This thing, it's a new flock. And not much to make sense about it. Its health is horrifically bad, although it's still a flock, so honestly it's less frail than a lot of creatures. And it is so fast. 136. It is the fastest creature in the game. And by 2 speed, too. Honestly, although nothing should go more than 133. But also, Technoraptor, which is this hybrid, which we'll get to in the next video, is also faster than 133. Resistances aren't very good. Moveset is pretty interesting. It's got Cunning Strike, and then got Precise Double Strike, which is, in practice, almost exactly like Precise Rampage, but slightly better because it's 2 attacks. And the Distracting Triple Strike, which is literally just Distracting Devastation on turn 2, doing 5,500 damage in 2 turns. I think it's a little underrated, though it is not, amazing, but still really good. It's so super fast, and it does good damage. And it's a flock. Number 12, Antarctopelta. This got buffed in 2.14 for whatever reason. It was already a pretty solid epic to begin with. It was, before it was around, Acrocanthosaurus level. And now it's up here. So, Ankylosaur stats, which here it's actually got pretty low stats for Ankylosaur. Well, Ankylosaur stats, usually not very good stats apart from the armor. This one's standout is the moveset. Taunting Resilient Group Impact is really good. Revengeance and Ferocity, you're probably going to be using that on turn 2 after you get that shield up. And it's got a counter. So yeah, Antarctopelta is really good now. Number 11, Giganotosaurus. Ridiculous health, while still having high damage and low speed like regular Tromper. Also has a lot of resistances, and Alert Showdown is honestly kind of crazy. Basically when you're on the third of health or less, you swap in, you heal yourself to full, you heal the enemy to full, swap in both you and the enemy, and stun the enemy. So it literally forces a 1v1. And then it's got Fierce Devouring Cleanse, which unfortunately doesn't really work correctly because the cleanse comes after the attack when that's not how cleansing works in this game for the most part. So yeah, and otherwise it's just like Fierce Strike and then it devours a little too. Group Defense Shattering Impact. It's like Group Shattering Impact, but with a 1 turn longer cooldown for no reason. Critical Obstruction, no escape with a crit chance increase. And yeah. Dinosaur is super tanky, that's its main thing. Number 10, Anorognathus. Somewhat kind of similar to Microraptor, but it is like a little older than Microraptor, added 2.14. So yeah. Frail, low base damage, but it still has high damage output because, you know. And fast. Resistances aren't really worth talking about. Cunning Strike, limited evasive strike, which is just evasive strike with a 1 turn cooldown, but also has 1 turn longer dodge. And Alert Frenzy, which is one of the most broken moves in the game. It's literally devastation on turn 2. It also speed increases, and when threatened, it's a rally heal. It also has minimal critical counter, which isn't really that useful. Alert the Flock, swap in, it exists, and Wing Beat, which is a not too good on escape. Really good Flock with high damage output, and yeah, just really good. Number 9, Brontolasmus. Another one that I do think is underrated. It's like Elasmotherium, but it's like Elasmotherium, but more. It has less health than Elasmotherium, but it's got more damage with the same speed and armor, same resistances, and it's got the same moveset, but with added Group Starting Rampage. So you're gonna do Group Starting Rampage into Taunting Rampage, and then whatever you do after that. You may see you're just gonna do those 2 rampages in a row for a lot of damage. Number 8, Titanic Boa. Really good on escaper. On escape rampage is of course really good. And then this thing has average to above average stats across the board with good resistances. Resilient Strike, of course. It's Resilient Strike. Precise Rampage for a good turn 1. For good damage. Or Distorting Impact, which honestly you could also use on turn 1 because it'll slow the enemy down and make him and basically make it to where you can combo that into Precise Rampage. Overall, you're just going to spam these 2 moves right here, and then if they swap out, they're going to get hit by a Rampage. Really good. Anyways, number 7, Compsognathus. That's not Compsognathus. The Comptes. So annoying. I hate these things. They're a flock. They got pretty typical flock stats and resistances. And its moveset. Cunning Strike, Hop and Mock, which, Alert Scurry, though. Alert Scurry is really good. On Secure, which, honestly, you're not going to be using it that much on Secure, it's a Rampage. It's basically just distracting Rampage on turn 1. But on Threatened, it is an Impact and distracts less, but it Rally heals, and it can do it on 2 members, which is why it's so annoying. It also has Alert the Flock to swap in and heal or dodge itself, and it's got Alert Swarm. And of course it's a Flock, which automatically makes it pretty annoying to deal with. Number 6, Diplodocus. An epic that, honestly, before its buff would have still probably been in the top 10. Or, actually probably in top 11. But then it got buffed, and now it's top 6. Honestly, why did they feel the need to buff this thing? You should, like, it was for more epic Flock counters. But you could have buffed some of the weak stuff like Rolly Mammoth and Kentrosaurus for that, instead of buffing strong stuff like Diplodocus and Antarctopelta. So yeah, super high health, high damage, and low speed with 2 of the best immunities in the game and distract resistance. And then the moveset's like the weaker part, but still really like pretty solid. There's only good starting rampage for a good turn 1. Before the update, before the buff, it just had regular starting rampage. It didn't have to wait to turn 2 to do that big damage. But then, group starting rampage, of course, you can do that in turn 1. Shield advantage is also basically just, it's a fierce, defense shattering strike, but it also puts up a shield for you as well. And of course, that's a cooldown. We're not going to talk about swapping stuff. Anyways, number 5, Woolly Rhino, one of the most annoying creatures in the game. This thing, oh boy. Basically, it's just a super annoying swapper. 1500 damage with swap and stunning strike. yeah, you can see why it's ranked as high. That alone makes it ranked as high. On top of having good health and a whole bunch of shields, which means it has a good chance of surviving, unless you're going up against the fierce. Number 4, Ankylodicurus. This thing is honestly kind of crazy after 2.9, although it was already pretty good before that. 2.9 just basically made it better because there's only an impact, then applied vulnerability. One of the few things that actually benefited from the vulnerability change to resilient moves. So yeah, typical tank stats with good resistances, and then just vulnerability and deceleration galore and like dodge removal. This thing is just a beast. It's literally like it's basically Dodicarus but better. This thing is a monster. Anyways, number 3, Thylacitator. This is basically just Sucotator, but better. It loses a little bit on the versatility, but it's still quite versatile. This thing has a skin? What? Okay, whatever. Oh, gee, that skin is ugly. Okay. Yeah. So, it's got Sucotator's health with less damage, but a little bit more speed, and a higher crit chance. Actually has resistances, decel immunity, and moveset. Keeps Superiority Strike, keeps a wounding move, although Maiming Wound you can argue whether it's better or worse than the Lethal Wound. Running Takedown instead of Nullifying Impact does the big damage. Swap and Distraction and Deliberate Prowl. Mostly you're going to be going Maiming Wound into Running Takedown to absolutely delete any tanks you're fighting. And Superiority Strike does kind of help against Cunnings, I guess. And it'll 2-shot most fierce too. This thing is just a 2-shot machine with the bleed and the rend, and it is just super good. But not as good as our number 2. Our number 2, Argenta Riggs. Used to be probably the most annoying creature in the game before it got a little bit of a nerf. So yeah, typical flock stats. Resistances, again, aren't really worth talking about. Alert, Buff, and Strike, decent. Basic move. Evasive Rampage, the Light Coning Rampage. Fearless Alert. Fearless Alert's basically which is you're going to be, when you're on one member, you're going to heal yourself up. And then you're also going to be spamming these Rampages for damage. Also Swap and Distraction. And then Alert on Escape Evasion is, of course, really annoying to deal with because when they're on 2 members, or 1, if you swap out, they're going to just have a dodge and they're going to heal. And, of course, it's a flock. But, our number 1 is Megalothops. This thing can contend with like legendaries and some uniques too. This thing is a beast. So it is somewhat like Megalonyx, but better. More health than Megalonyx, a little bit less damage, but more speed. Of course, has armor. And it doesn't have decel immune like Megalonyx, which is a little bit unfortunate, but actually is kind of fortunate because otherwise it'd be even more broken. Still has Cautious Rampage and Camouflage. Changes out Cunning Strike for Determined Strike, which is one of the best basic moves in the game. It is literally Cunning Strike and Resilient Strike in one. And also has Distracting Impact and keeps counter, except Armor Piercing counter for some reason. Thank God it doesn't have Swap and Stunning Strike. It's still a Stunning Alert though, and it's got Camouflage on Escape. This thing is crazy, it beats a lot of things. It's really annoying to deal with. Yeah. That's the end of the Epic ranking. Hope you guys enjoyed. Like and subscribe if you want. Let me know what you think. And I'll see y'all for the Legendary ranking. Goodbye.